Nick Ashley, Westwood One Sports. Bright and early on a Saturday morning. A lot of sipping of the coffee as it usually goes. Combine week. Who doesn't love it? Who doesn't love watching all the fat guys run 40s in their underwear? The NFL is great, isn't it? The NFL is an absolute monster. It becomes that thing where every single event matters, and we analyze it and we break it down and we look at what everybody says at the combine, and then years later we look back and go, how the hell did we get convinced that this guy was going to be a star? Whatever look, it is what it is. It's a world that we live in and that we try to accept, but you can get completely lied to at times when it comes to the combine. Not every time, though. The one thing we know now heading into this year and heading into this draft is that Fernando Mendoza is going to be the number 1 overall pick. And, if you're the Raiders and if you're, pretty much anybody else looking around the league, there's no real surprise there. And there's only one quarterback that's going to likely be a first-round pick. Ty Simpson might be the guy that sneaks in because teams like to stretch and teams like to say, hey, we can justify why this guy could maybe be a first-round pick. That's what happens with quarterbacks. A lot it's the position that's just different than the rest of them. But, you get down to it and you sit around and look and realize, like, you may not have any quarterback from this draft that could end up being a true franchise quarterback. It happens all the time. But one of the things that I've always said, and it's really important, and there's very little control that, sometimes if at all, unless you're Eli Manning, which is hilarious to think that he had this, there's very little control that you have as a young quarterback, as a rookie quarterback, as someone that's going to get drafted with the hope that it's going to be an organization that can help make you a better quarterback. Because as talented as you might be in college, we all know the transition to the NFL is very, very different. It's really different. And Fernando Mendoza has a lot of the intangibles, right, in terms of the maturity and the leadership and the accuracy and the experience in college and the success that he's had in college. And yeah, like, it's hard for us to adjust at times to look back and go, wait, did Indiana just win the national championship? They did. And Fernando Mendoza, an Indiana quarterback, could be the number 1 overall pick in the NFL draft. It's a weird adjustment, but it's the world we live in today. And look, Fernando Mendoza has said, and this is the right thing to say, and this is obviously the smart thing to say, is that, he loves having Tom Brady as a mentor. Yeah, he already knows, like, he knows Tom Brady is going to be somebody that can help make him better. He understands that he's going number 1 overall to the Raiders. There's no surprise there. We can play these games, and if you dabble, if you will, the odds are incredibly in favor of him going number 1 overall. But this is a story as old as time in the NFL. And if you look at where the Raiders have been and you look at the disaster that they've been, I mean, we look at years and years of ineptitude and losing. And look, the Raiders came into this year thinking they were going to win now, or this past season. By the way, are we at the spot now where we can say last year, or is it still this year in the NFL? We're not in the new league year. Carlos, do you have a rule on that? Have you figured that out yet? I can't figure that out. Is when we start to say the 2025 season and last year. Are we done after the Super Bowl with that? Do you have a rule? Second, the Super Bowl's done in the last season. Boom. All right, so good. That's kind of where I am too. Once it's done, it becomes last season. So good. I think we're kind of on the same page with that, as a lot of people are. And look, the Raiders have not had a track record of success for a very, very long time. But there are times where certain players can kind of break through that. I look at Joe Burrow as a great example. Look, people, when we talk about dysfunctional franchises in the NFL, for the longest time, the conversation also included the Bengals. And then they draft Joe Burrow, and by his second year, they're in a Super Bowl. They go to an AFC championship game. And I understand there have been injuries, and there's been a lack of success recently, and all of these things. But with all that said, Joe Burrow has overcome, even in spite of the losses and the lost seasons and the injuries or whatever, Joe Burrow has still been able to overcome a lot of the dysfunction and a lot of the really bad history and cheap ownership that the Bengals have in Cincinnati, right? So maybe there's a chance that somebody like Fernando Mendoza is able to do that too. Because when you have the level of maturity and the leadership and the work ethic that he has, coupled with somebody like Tom Brady, who's now in the organization, that's absolutely going to be a part of this. Like, you think Tom Brady's not going to want to sit there and mentor Fernando Mendoza? He's a part owner of this team. He wants this team to be successful. And look, we've seen this time and time again where just because you're a great player does not make you a great coach, a great general manager, a great owner, a great post-playing career leader, right? Look at Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan, and this hits home being in Washington, we all know what Michael Jordan was as a player. Second best player behind LeBron James, yeah, I'll say it. But when it came to Michael Jordan running a front office, Michael Jordan and ownership, Michael Jordan drafting players, Michael Jordan coming back and playing for the Wizards and absolutely just making life hell for Kwame Brown, who may not have ever been a great player to begin with, but certainly didn't get a chance with Michael Jordan when he's 19 years old, Kwame getting yelled at by Jordan. So, like, it doesn't guarantee that just because Tom Brady is in the organization and was the all-time, was the greatest quarterback we've ever seen, it doesn't guarantee that that's going to translate to his coaching leadership, Fernando Mendoza having success, and how much time he's actually going to put into that. So there's a lot of factors that are there. But at the same time, it gives him an opportunity to potentially grow and be in a better spot. And hopefully, if you're the Raiders looking at this and saying, okay, we can break through all of the lack of success we've had. Klint Kubiak coming in, new head coach. Klint Kubiak's going to lean on Tom Brady. So there's really a lot riding on Tom Brady. Also, they got to figure out what the hell is going to happen with Maxx Crosby, because if I were Maxx Crosby, I would not want to be a part of a rebuild. But that's a whole other conversation for certainly another day with this team. All right, I'm at Nick Ashew on all of the socials. Speaking of Fernando Mendoza, we know that when you get to the combine, you get a lot of weird questions. There's always just random-ass things that are asked to players. Some of them you're like, oh, you can't really ask that in an interview, but you get away with it in the NFL because it's the NFL. Fernando Mendoza at the combine was asked the obvious question. I think it was NFL Network. What the weirdest question was that he has been asked, and this was his answer. Maybe you should get arrested. I love that and that he doesn't want to expose the team. Maybe you'll get arrested so you'll slide in the draft is what a team said. I mean, that's less of a question and more of just an awkward way of a team saying we'd love you to slide so we could draft you. But, dude, sometimes, man, people say some weird stuff in these drafts, these pre-draft interviews and at the combine and just throughout this entire process. You also have to know that this is the time of year where it's lying season. So just remember that. Things that are said, things that are leaked, things that are maybe spoken publicly that aren't really what somebody feels is put out there just to kind of see if you can get a team to panic. Like Dan Quinn, the Commanders coach, was on a show and talked about, everybody knows the Commanders need defense, but then there's conversations about maybe them drafting Jeremiah Love because they could use a running back. And it's, well, yeah, if you're drafting 7th overall and there's a team sitting in 9, 10, 11, like the Chiefs are behind Washington. They could use a running back. I've seen Jeremiah Love mocked to them in a bunch of different places. If you're smart, you, this time of year, want to make other teams think you could be going a lot of different directions in the draft, because then just maybe somebody's desperate enough to say, we'll offer you next year's first round that we got as well if you let us trade up a few spots, or however that draft works out, however that trade works out, which it's going to be a lot of different ways. This is lying season, and this is how it goes. And we overvalue so much of what goes on right now, knowing that there is so much more time ahead of us. There's individual workouts, which so many of these players are involved in. A lot don't even get involved in the combine whatsoever. Some quarterbacks don't want to throw, like Fernando Mendoza is not going to throw. You have a lot of guys that run a really fast 40. They get drafted way too high. Darius Heyward-Bey. There's a name you haven't heard in a while. Oh, by the way, was that the Raiders? Oh, that's right. That was also the Raiders. I get it. It wasn't the same group of people at the top, but there's a name that gets thrown back. I mean, look, Zach Wilson, Anthony Richardson in their workouts. Man, I will never forget the hype around Zach Wilson and the throws that he was making on the run. and then Anthony Richardson hitting the top of the ceiling of the field house or whatever he was throwing. And that was, again, these are individual workouts. These aren't combine, but it all kind of lumps together, right? In the end, it's watching players and evaluating the work that they're doing in front of you, scouts, cameras, all of those things, combine, pro days, any of that. And you get to this point where you see teams, and it's not always the case, but you see teams get so enamored with the individual metrics of a certain player, right? Running a really fast 40, which sometimes it works. Sometimes it matters. Like if an edge rusher is running a 4.5 140, which we just had, that can matter. If an offensive lineman has a solid 40 time, do you really care that much? Like, does it matter that much? It shows their level of athleticism and foot speed, and it has a factor in there. But like, we tend to overvalue that at times. The way you also watch arm strength. Do you remember the name Kyle Boller? A lot of you may not remember that. You may not remember that name. Go back and watch the video of Kyle Boller throwing from his knees from the 50-yard line through the uprights. The Ravens loved it. Did not work out. So we can see the physical gifts and we can see the fireworks in the moment from certain players in these workouts leading up to the draft. But in the end, you know what really works? It's film. And I know that sounds real old school and it sounds old man yells at cloud, and I'm not at that point in my life yet, but I'm going to go ahead and say it anyway. Sometimes we need to just watch the film and nothing else. I mean, really. Because you have, look, there are things that matter. I understand that teams, especially with first-round picks, there's so much pressure. There's so many things that you have to factor in. There's so many little details that you want to be able to say, you can cross that off the list. It's a yes, it's a no. They're able to do this. And now you're factoring in AI with all of these, because they're using AI as a part of this now, too. Don't think it's not for a second. There's literally commercials about this now. But when you get to this point where, like, some guys like Marvin Harrison Jr. didn't work out at all at the combine, okay. Now, we could talk about his career and say where it is, but that's coaching, that's, quarterback, that's a lot of different things. We get enamored by so much of these physical traits. In the end, go back and watch what a player did in college. It matters the most. If you look at right now, let's look at the success so far that we've had from that quarterback class of 2024. So that's Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, Drake May, and 6 quarterbacks drafted in the first 12 picks of that draft. Now, there's been a lot of success. There have been some injuries across the board for a bunch of those quarterbacks, but there's also been some really high points. Bo Nix and the Broncos getting to an AFC championship game. I know he was hurt and didn't play in the AFC championship game. Jaden Daniels got to an NFC championship game. Caleb Williams already won a playoff game. Drake May gets to a Super Bowl. That's a lot of success for a quarterback class that's been in the league a couple of years, and that's it. But if you go back and look at all of those quarterbacks, from a Michael Penix Jr., from even a J.J. McCarthy, I know a lot of injuries, Bo Nix, Jaden Daniels, even Caleb Williams, they all had experience, a lot of college experience. And how do you dictate where they are in the NFL and what they can do? Well, you see what they did on the field. You see what they did on the field in college. And that's ultimately what this stuff comes down to. And I know that teams want to justify certain things. Like if Ty Simpson goes out and has a really great pro day and, excites all of these teams, there is going to be a team, maybe it's the Steelers, that says, you know what, this is our guy. But the Steelers tried to reach for a quarterback recently too. How'd that Kenny Pickett thing work out? You got to be really, really careful. But it's because teams get so desperate with quarterbacks specifically. Edge rushers are another one, the most important positions. You want to find that guy. And sometimes you want to be able to justify. It's like that friend you have that just really wants a solid relationship. They're, look, I'm ready to settle down. I'm ready to get married. I want to start a family. Like, I'm over this. And they've just been dating, and it just has not worked out. And eventually they're in a relationship with somebody that you look and go, I could see it, but I think we got some issues still here. And those issues get overlooked. It's just you're trying to justify why that's the right person for you. That's what happens a lot with quarterbacks. And that's what happens a lot with edge rushers and really important positions. I'd argue left tackle and some of the most important positions in the NFL, right? It's either the quarterback or what gets close to the quarterback, protects the quarterback, gets after the quarterback, whatever it is. In the end, it's still what happens in college. And the more experience a player has in college, the better. And in some ways, with guys deciding now that they want to go back, with NIL money really getting to the point where players are saying, I could do an extra year in college, not really have to go to class, make a few $1 million, then still get drafted, Hopefully it's going to be not the Jets at the top of the order, so I have to worry about getting drafted by them. Like, these are all things that get factored in now. And it does give you a little bit more in terms of evaluation from college to pro, where we may be looking at the combine and saying it's more about finding those guys that didn't get enough attention in college, that are from a smaller school, that are from a program that people weren't paying attention to as much, as opposed to, do you really need to see the stars out there at the combine? Do you really need to see the guys that are likely going to be top 10 picks out there running the 40, out there bench pressing? It doesn't matter like it used to. I argue that it didn't matter at all for any of these stars, and it really just comes down to finding those other players. All right, we're brought to you by Progressive Commercial Insurance. Protect small businesses with affordable coverage options. Quote today at progressivecommercial.com. We are finally in a spot where we know we can still always publicly shame the bad owners in the NFL. Nick Ashew, Westwood One Sports. And I'm at Nick Ashew on all the socials, streaming live on my YouTube channel right now. It's just Nick Ashew. It's real simple. And it's said right now, too. By the way, well done. Well done. I know we put a lot of work into it. Rhymes with cashew. When I was a kid, I wish I'd learned that. It would have made my life a lot easier. And yes, it sounds like a sneeze for those of you that have not been exposed to this name over a period of time. Yeah, that's how it goes. All right, so Jerry Jones, anytime he speaks, it's always interesting, right? Sometimes it's polarizing. Sometimes it's just meandering down a windy river on different topics and ideas and whatever pops into his head. But the one thing I know is that anytime Jerry has something to say, everybody wants to listen. I mean, there are not many owners in the NFL that are willing to speak publicly consistently about what they're doing and what they're thinking and, whatever it is they just had for a dream last night, like Jerry Jones. And listen, I respect that because for so many owners that love to hide behind the curtain, Jerry Jones is always willing to speak, say why he made a decision, and handle it publicly. Everything. I give him a lot of credit for that. Now, granted, it's the Cowboys. So if you're not a Cowboys fan, you're probably going to make fun of them. That's just the way the world works. But for years, the Cowboys have kind of quieted themselves down in the offseason. It's been much more about drafting. It's been a lot more about them, developing their talent and not overspending like they've done for so many years. Now, this offseason, they've already franchised George Pickens, which we knew was coming. He had a great season, and George Pickens is perfect for the Cowboys. And to add a second star receiver, let's be honest. I mean, George Pickens, the ceiling is high with him. As long as he can just kind of keep his focus, maybe grow up a little bit. There are some things there. George Pickens is a Dallas Cowboy. But when it comes to a season going 7-9-1 and then hitting an offseason where you know that the NFC East is vulnerable right now and also in flux with a team like the Giants and John Harbaugh really raising the floor most likely for that, knowing the Commanders will probably be aggressive this offseason and the Eagles are going to have to do a lot when it comes to their offense and figuring that all out, and maybe they're a little vulnerable at the top. If you look at Jerry Jones and the Cowboys, the question now becomes, are they going to be more aggressive this offseason again? So they're going to spend money. That's the gist of it. Oh, I would bet that we'll spend more money in free agency than we have in the past. It's my terrible Jerry Jones impression. It's gone on for years. Look, the Cowboys have no cap space, but they have the ability to create cap space, right? So the cap set at like $301 million, but you can restructure Dak and CeeDee Lamb, Tyler Smith. They can get themselves up to like $66 million in cap space. So the Cowboys can make it work, which is why I always laugh at the salary cap, right? We every year it's like this team is over the cap, and then they can create like $40 million in cap space. They restructure contracts, you release some guys who don't have guaranteed money. So this happens all the time where you look at heading into an offseason and go, well, this team has cap space, but this team doesn't. It can change in the snap of a finger. I mean, really, if a bunch of guys on a roster that are making big money, I mean, Patrick Mahomes did it too. If they decide, hey, I'll restructure my deal this offseason so you can get some more talent around us, you watch these teams that know this is a pivotal offseason, we're going to find ways to make it work. That's essentially what this comes down to. So they've already franchised George Pickens. We know he's going to be a part of this team next year. Maybe they'll work out a long-term deal with him. But if you're the Cowboys, look, Jerry Jones is 83 years old, man. He wants them to win another Super Bowl. Now, there's a difference between wanting and putting in the effort and truly building a team that can win a Super Bowl, and they haven't done that in a really, really long time. You can say all day, hey, we really want to win a Super Bowl. That is a terrible. Hold on. We're going to need this. Yeah, I'm going to need a little more coffee to get that right. Look, you can say all day, if you're Jerry Jones or anybody else around the Cowboys, that you want to win a Super Bowl, that you want to be a contender, but you're not showing it. The Cowboys haven't shown that for years. You go 7-9-1 with a head coach that nobody else wanted. Nobody wanted Brian Schottenheimer as a head coach. There's a reason why he got the job in Dallas because nobody wanted the Dallas job and nobody wanted Brian Schottenheimer as a head coach. So it was a perfect match. It was two sides that said, well, no one wants you, no one wants me. Cool, we should get together. This will work out. Now, how long he's the head coach, who knows? They go 7-9-1 again this year, 7-10, and he's probably fired. But at the same time, you still at least have some level of clout if you're the Dallas Cowboys, where you're going to be on national TV. There's a level of exposure that is still there above most other teams in the NFL, where some players may say, I want to go play in Dallas. I want to be a part of that team, right? They're horrible defensively. You know Dallas is going to need to get aggressive defensively this offseason. Got a couple of first-round picks like Jarrah talked about. I mean, the Cowboys' defense was at or near the bottom of just like every statistical category this past year. They've got a new defensive coordinator in Christian Parker. Okay. I mean, does it work? Does it not? We don't know. But what we do know is that this is a Jerry Jones at 83 years old looking down going, seriously, not to be morbid here, but like, how much time do I have left? Really? Like that's what this comes down to. So now the question becomes, does he just throw everything against the wall and see what sticks? And I think we might see that this offseason because you're realizing the plan hasn't worked before. And it hasn't worked in a long time. And look, I'll say this. The one thing about Jerry Jones is that he's well respected around the NFL. Like, owners love him. He's one of the OGs. And with what he's been able to do to building the NFL, building the Cowboys, everything, the success that he's had, and I make fun of him all the time, but I got a lot of respect for Jerry Jones and what he's built. I mean, he's a terrible GM, and he's should have been removed from any control over any sort of player personnel decisions for a really long time. And he's even said himself in the past that if a GM that he hired has done the job that he's done over the years, he would have fired him. But it's him, so it's different. And I know he's relinquished some control in other people, but like, let's be honest, Jarrah's still got plenty of control with that organization. So it comes down to now, how much do you really want to win and how much are you truly going to let football people make decisions? And how aggressive are you going to be? And look, the Cowboys at least are consistently mediocre at best, right? There are some owners that are just complete dumpster fires and don't care. I'd argue that Jerry Jones, even when they go 7-9-1, and even when they don't truly show in their actions that they really want to build a true contender, that he does still actually care. There's other owners don't even give a damn. Like, I would take Jerry Jones as an owner of my team, which is hilarious as a Commanders fan. I would take that over vast majority of the owners in the NFL. There's a lot of dum-dums that are in charge. I mean, there really are. And now we're getting to the point where these franchises are getting so expensive. So, you're going to have big groups of guys. Even the billionaires can't even afford NFL teams anymore. And it's like, okay, good. Maybe now there'll be a little bit more of a checks and balances that's going to be involved there. But thank God we had and it was very predictable, right? Thank God we had all of those NFLPA report cards leak out. So you can see how bad some of these owners are. And it's funny because the owners that did not want it to leak was mostly owners of teams that got really bad grades overall, so the Steelers got the lowest overall grade across the board. The Steelers, which a lot of people wouldn't have thought about until you look at some of the things like the facilities and the field and the training staff and all of these different categories that get factored in by players where they're like, this was my experience and it sucked in Pittsburgh. And now it just came out that the Steelers are going to replace their field because it got an F-, which isn't even a real grade. We're just making up grades. That's what's so great about this. It's like, no, you're not even an F. It's an F-. It is so bad that we are making up a grade that is worse than the worst grade that you could possibly get. So now the Steelers, after being publicly shamed because their field was considered the worst in the NFL because they got high school and college games being played there, and they just don't give a damn about the quality of it. Now they're going to replace it, and they're going to change the grass, and I'm not even going to try to pretend that I know the difference between Bermuda and the Kentucky bluegrass and whatever the hell they're changing. Don't know. They have 5 bathroom stalls for an entire team. Think about this. Think of an entire football team, 53-man roster, other guys, everybody else involved. 5 bathroom stalls in the locker room. Now, these are big dudes that are eating a lot, that are down in a lot of protein, and you got 5 bathroom stalls. Like, these are the types of things you have to think about as an organization. But the fact that obviously the owners are like, we don't want this coming out, or some of them didn't. And then there's others that were happy that it was going to be the case. So it makes sense when you see, Well, the Steelers didn't want it to leak. The Cardinals didn't want it to leak. The Browns didn't want the grades to leak. Oh, who are the lowest rated teams in the NFL? Oh, that makes sense. Surprisingly, too, is actually the Patriots and Robert Kraft not getting high marks, if you will, as an owner. Look, bad owners need to be held accountable more. I've said this time and time again, and this is one of the few ways that you can actually do it. Lazy owners need to be publicly shamed. I get it, right? They own the team. Oh, they hold them accountable. This is what I get from people, right? How can you hold them accountable? They're owners. Well, they should be treated like CEOs, because in the end, if you are in a spot where your organization year in and year out is losing, is not successful financially to a point, again, all of these teams are making money. It's the NFL. And that's part of the reason why in the end it's kind of overlooked, because they can say, well, they're making money. So, but if you are consistently known as a horrible organization, look at the Browns, look at the Cardinals. These are organizations, the Jets, also another ownership group getting really bad grades. And Woody Johnson didn't want the report cards out anymore, and yet they still leaked. Shocker. Again, all of the names involved in this, who'd you think? But this, if you are consistently one of these owners and one of these teams that finishes in the bottom every single year, at what point do you get held accountable? Who holds you accountable? Who forces you to actually make decisions? This is the only thing. Because now the Steelers get publicly shamed because they've got a horrible field. So they go, oh, well, no, we're going to replace our grass. We're going to get some better grass. Of course they're going to. It wasn't going to happen if you weren't forced to spend the money. And there's some owners that care. Look, the Commanders went from the worst in the NFL in 2023, well, 2020, both of them. When Dan Snyder was there, they were at the bottom or near the bottom in all of these report cards. You know what the Commanders finished this year? Third best overall, not ownership, overall with these grades. Dolphins, Vikings, Commanders. Ownership, A+ for the Washington Commanders. And that's why that hits home for me when your team has bad ownership, because I know what it feels like, and you feel trapped. You feel held hostage. Organizations are held hostage by bad ownership, but also great ownership can flip things so quickly. Now, do the Commanders have a million things to do this offseason? Of course. It's all I've talked about this week in D.C. But like when you look at where you sit and how much you can jump from year to year in terms of how an organization is run just by the people in charge, it goes back to one of my favorite movie quotes of all time. Attitude reflects leadership. It was in Remember the Titans, and it is so true. Because when you've got great ownership and great leaders, this happens everywhere, across the board in sports, everywhere, in any business. It doesn't matter. Great leadership is a massive difference maker. And this shows where good free agents may want to end up, right? If you know that going to Washington is now going to be a great experience, a great workplace experience with a new stadium coming and great training staff and weight room, and they've made all these improvements, that's going to make you more likely to maybe sign with the Commanders than it is the Steelers at this point. Because right now, if you're a free agent, would you want to go to Pittsburgh? Would you wait for the Steelers? I know they've got a great history, but here's the thing. Mike Tomlin masked a lot of the deficiencies and dysfunction that may have been going on behind the scenes there. Mike Tomlin ain't in Pittsburgh anymore. So what is Mike McCarthy going to do? Show more Austin Powers clips to the team? To rally them in training camp? If you don't know, go look that up. The Steelers could be heading to an era of sadness. Really. Now, you've got the Browns in the division, so you at least won't be at the bottom. The Browns are going to be horrible. Browns will probably win 2 games this year. But if you're the Steelers, I mean, you've had Mike Tomlin, players coach, guys want to go play for him for a long period of time, but you are the lowest rated organization overall in the NFL by players. And your head coach that players want to play for is no longer there. What's that tell you? There is a very good chance that the Pittsburgh Steelers could be headed to years of dysfunction. The quarterback situation's not settled. They've got a terrible field. It's not a good place to play by players' ratings, by players' grades, players' experience saying, this ain't fun. There is a chance that you could be watching the Pittsburgh Steelers sitting in mediocrity for a long time where they're begging Mike Tomlin to come back. Mike McCarthy is the guy that follows the guy, and that is a tough position to be in. I love that these were leaked. I love that we are now going to see who the good owners and the bad owners are still moving forward. because this is one of the only ways. Because you got to hit that ego, right? You got to hit that billionaire ego and twist the knife and be like, yeah, that's right. Your field sucks. Your training staff's terrible. We're all laughing at you. They're all going to laugh at you. That's where that's what you have to do. You have to publicly shame bad owners to get them to make decisions, because otherwise, a lot of them, they don't have to spend money. They're not going to do it. And I get it. It's a business, profit, right? I understand all of the mindset for this. But it's different when you're talking the NFL, man, because you got a fan base that can very easily say, just like a bad restaurant, if the food is terrible, are you going to continue to go to that restaurant? Just like if the product on the field is bad, at what point do you say, I'm no longer going to spend my hard-earned money on these games for a horrible team? That's why I support Browns fans, man. You guys come out and you love your team, and you deserve better. There's a lot of fan bases that deserve that. I've been there. I get it. So it hits very, very close to home. All right, I'm at Nick Ashew on all of the socials. The quarterback class this offseason between rookies and free agents and potential trade targets is very, very bad. And there's another one that's just been added to the list, but he is a project. What teams should do instead of trying to find a bridge quarterback and reaching for a quarterback next? Nick Ashew, Westwood One Sports. And I'm at Nick Ashew across all the socials. Man, if you need a quarterback this offseason, your team needs a good luck. It's not a good spot to be in. So I just saw this report the other day that Malik Willis could end up getting $30 million a year. Now, good for him if he does. I'll never, ever try to reach in a player's pocket and take their money. Like, good for you if you can maximize your income. It's a sport where one hit can totally change the entire trajectory of your career. But, dude, we've seen very little from Malik Willis on the field, and they're talking about a Sam Darnold type contract like with Seattle, 3 years, $30 million, or 3 years, $100 million, kind of around that range is what we're looking at. Are we serious? Like, are you willing to take that risk as an NFL team when you've seen very little from Malik Willis on the field? A little more success, obviously, with Green Bay. But let's remember, let's go back to the Matt Flynn. I know it's a long time ago. Remember, Matt Flynn had one spectacular game for the Packers, and then Seattle gave him a deal, and they went, oh, wait, Russell Wilson's better, and the rest is history. Look, this is what happens with the quarterback market so often in the NFL is that, teams will stretch, right? I talk about it a lot. I call it Jay Cutler syndrome, where there's always going to be a team, a coaching staff, front office, whatever, that says, we can get the most out of that guy because look at what his physical gifts are. Now, Malik Willis in Tennessee versus Malik Willis in Green Bay, big difference. So we've seen a high level of improvement. And I understand that Malik Willis was also looked at as somebody that could have been the number one overall pick, which seemed ridiculous at the time, but especially with the way that he dropped. But it kind of makes you feel similar to the Shedeur Sanders situation where there's this wide range of where he could get drafted, falls a lot in the draft, but then gets out on the field. And eventually Shedeur Sanders, it was a little bit sooner where he went, oh, okay, there's something there. Clearly, this was stupid, should not have drafted as far as he went. Completely different situations. But when you look at where Sam Darnold was, you at least got an idea of what he can do and what his ceiling could be with more of a sample size in Minnesota. Now, did it end well there? Nope. Last regular season game, playoff game, it was bad for Sam Darnold. But it worked out for Seattle. Obviously, they won a Super Bowl. He had a great NFC Championship game, was okay in the Super Bowl. But that's a major risk for a team to go and give $30 million to any quarterback that you've seen a very small sample size on the field with. But in reality, $30 million for over, essentially not all of it's even going to be guaranteed. That's the market in the NFL. And honestly, that's kind of cheap. That's where we are because now Anthony Richardson and the Colts both agreed, yeah, it's time for you to move on. He's going to look for a trade. They're going to look for a trade. They're going to figure that out. He's going to move on. You knew that was going to be the case. Daniel Jones, even though he's injured, is going to come back and be their starter eventually, and they're going to ride with that. There is another quarterback. You need to sit him. You need to give him time to develop. If I'm Anthony Richardson, I am going the route of a Baker Mayfield, of a Daniel Jones, and I'll tell you why Daniel Jones also went this route, and the Sam Darnold. Go somewhere and be a backup. People forget that Daniel Jones was released by the Giants and actually was in the Vikings organization and spent some time, at least small sample size, but some time playing or learning, really, in Kevin O'Connell's system. Baker Mayfield went to the Rams. Remember that Thursday night game? Just kind of came in off the bench, game-winning drive, Thursday night football. Sean McVay's offense. And we know Sam Darnold, 49ers, Kyle Shanahan, which Mac Jones has now been in that situation and that system too. So when all of this gets put together, if I'm somebody like Anthony Richardson, now you could argue Malik Willis has already done that. Spent some time in Green Bay, played behind Jordan Love. So maybe this was the growth that he already needed, but that's still a lot of money for a really small sample size. Anthony Richardson's not going to get $30 million a year like Malik Willis could. But if I'm Anthony Richardson, I am not looking at a situation where I am going to be a starter. And I know it's difficult. I know that there is a level of pride and there's a level of probably ego that's there. And it's understandable. He's human. To go from what happened with the Colts to then going to be a backup in his mind could, and I'm just jumping into his head. I don't actually know if this is the case, but we've seen this story before. Saw it with RG3 going to Cleveland when Washington released him. When you're in this spot where you get drafted by a team and it does not work, Situation dictates a lot of the success of a quarterback. Like I said, right? It doesn't work. You can't control where you're drafted. The next step, when you either if you get traded, it's a little different. But if you have an opportunity to either be a starter somewhere on a bad team, because that's what it's going to be, it's not going to be a good team, or a chance to go be a backup for a year, two, learn, get better, get an opportunity to grow as a quarterback, go be the backup. Go learn. Go play in a system that's going to make you better. Now, Anthony Richardson may not have as much control over that as some of these other quarterbacks I mentioned have when they were free agents. But let's say a trade doesn't work out and they just release him because nobody wants to give the Colts anything. They can't even get a 7th-round pick. They release him. Okay. And if you're Anthony Richardson, go to a team where you can be a backup and learn, because it doesn't mean that it's going to be permanent. It's a step back to shoot forward, right? That's what it really could be for him. Now, I'm not saying that Anthony Richardson may ever be a franchise quarterback, a starting quarterback. Do I think the Colts reach when they drafted him? Absolutely. But do I think that there's a shot if he plays this right? Yeah. It's not going to be easy. Might not be fun. You might have to suppress your ego a little bit and put aside what's happened with the Colts. But if you let ego get in the way and help cloud your judgment, you're not going to be making the smartest decisions for your long-term future in anything. It's not just sports. It's anywhere. Sometimes you got to make those sacrifices and say, if I make this sacrifice now, it's going to lead to something better down the road, and having that idea and having that eye on the future. Anthony Richardson should not have been drafted number 4 overall, and he certainly should not have been starting right away. He should have been sitting for like 2 years. But it's impossible to do that for a quarterback that's drafted in the first round. The NFL just doesn't work that way anymore. And partially that's the system. It's these rookie contracts, trying to then maximize what you can with a cheaper deal. But if that quarterback that you're forcing out on the field when they're not ready does not grow and doesn't make it to a second contract with you, does any of that matter? Does rushing them out make any sense whatsoever? And this is what teams have to factor in. Anthony Richardson barely started in high school, barely started at Florida. And you expected him to be ready for the NFL his rookie year? This is the world that we live in today with quarterbacks. We're rushing these guys out there. Sometimes you got to overlook the financial side of this, where if he's a quarterback that isn't ready his rookie year, but you throw him out there anyway and then can't develop, has bad habits, mentally broken down, loses confidence, there's a mental side of this that you have to factor in too. If you have all of that snowball, and then that quarterback doesn't even make it to the next contract, it doesn't even make it through their rookie contract, the hell's the point? Why are we doing this? It's okay to sit a quarterback that you've drafted, which is why, honestly, if I'm the Raiders, I'd sit Fernando Mendoza at the beginning. Let Geno Smith get out there. You paid all this money for Geno Smith. Why does Fernando Mendoza have to start right away? The Patriots did it with Drake May. The Chiefs did it with Patrick Mahomes. I know these aren't the same situations necessarily, but you could even argue Drake May didn't even need to start at all his rookie year. It's a horrible offensive line and still is, but year 2, obviously, second in MVP voting. Again, every quarterback's different, skill set's different, all of these things. But if I'm a team right now that's in desperate need of a quarterback this offseason, I'm thinking basic bridge quarterback. I'm building up my run game and I'm building up my defense. Really, look at the 2 teams that made the Super Bowl. Defense, run game. Go spend a little money on a running back. There's actually quality running backs that are younger that could be on the free agent market. Now, some of them might get franchised, so that's an issue there. Breece Hall is likely going to get franchised by the Jets, but I would rather build up my run game, have somebody like Kirk Cousins for a year at 38 as a bridge quarterback. Don't trade for Kyler or Tua unless the Dolphins or Cardinals are essentially going to pay a majority of those contracts. That might work for you, and that's maybe the only way, but don't overpay for that. Build up your defense. The NFL may be quarterback-driven, but we just saw that you still need to have defense to win. You do. You do need to still have a level of a run game. You can still have a balanced offense in the NFL and win. I mean, even the Chiefs this year. The Chiefs had a great defense, but their run game was inconsistent, and their quarterback got hurt, and the Chiefs were still not even a winning team before Patrick Mahomes got hurt. Like, you can have a great quarterback, but sometimes you need more than that still. Don't force it. I understand that your ceiling is always going to be lower when you don't have great quarterback play, but again, look at the 2 teams that made the Super Bowl. I know Drake May was great in the regular season. He was horrible in the playoffs. Sam Darnold, inconsistent at best with a great NFC championship game. Kenneth Walker was the reason why, along with the Seattle defense, that was the reason why they won. So we force it a lot in a position that's so important in the NFL, and I get it. But if you can find quality backs and have a strong run game, or receivers that are running backs as well, have that versatility, there's a lot that you can do with it. Just can't, I mean, $30 million a year for a quarterback you've barely seen start is a major risk, but it's probably going to happen. That's how important that position is. But yeah, Anthony Richardson, give yourself a chance, learn, grow. You could have a long career ahead of you if you do that. All right, second hour coming up. Nick Ashew, Westwood One Sports. Oh, did we have ourselves a little rumble last night in the NBA? I'm at Nick Ashew. Across all the socials, streaming on the YouTube as well, the old YouTube. It's my channel. Simple. Just find it. It's there. We're good to go. Hi. It's early in some places. This is how it goes at the beginning of every hour. Just get a. You gotta. It's funny. I've realized that like no matter what I try to do for these Saturday morning shows, I'm always up before my alarm. I really am. It's like you think I can fall asleep a little earlier tonight. I'm tired, watching a movie with the wife, whatever. No, I'm still just way up before my alarm. Just is what it is. There's a level of excitement and anticipation for it. And we had ourselves a rumble last night in the NBA. And I don't know if we have the play-by-play for it, guys. And I know I sprung that on you, so I will totally take that. I know I emailed it this morning, but like, look, okay, we're gonna look for a minute because here's the thing: the NBA is in a very, very weird spot right now. In fact, it's also a very bad spot in some ways. And one of the biggest things now that we're watching is this evolution in the NFL and the NBA in different ways. The NBA, it's much more prevalent. It's bigger. It's who's going to be the next face of the league, right? After LeBron, who's the face of the league? Because LeBron is still the face of the NBA. He may not be the same LeBron James. The Lakers may not be. The Lakers are a playoff team. They're not a title contending team. But LeBron is still the face of the league because there's familiarity, because he's somebody that's in this spot where he's always going to be polarizing. He's always going to be the center of attention with no matter what he is. So then the question becomes, well, who else is there? Who's next? Who's that next guy up? Well, there are a lot of names that get thrown around. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Nikola Jokic are two, and they just did a MVP straw poll. Essentially, Tim Bontemps at ESPN does this multiple times every year, and it's actually relatively accurate. They sit and they ask all of the MVP voters to just kind of pretend you're voting and who would you vote for? And Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who won last year, right at the very top. Nikola Jokic behind him. But the votes, first place votes were 78-18 in favor of SGA. So it's like, oh, well, we're clearly seeing who's still going to be the most likely MVP at this point. The problem is that you have this 65-game rule where if a guy doesn't play 65 games, he's ineligible for any off-season or end-of-season award in the NBA. And what does that do to a league where your top two and really three of your top four potential MVP candidates, SGA, Nikola Jokic, Victor Wembanyama, that's where the votes went. Three of those four may not play enough games this year because of injuries to even be eligible to win the MVP. That's a major problem for a league that's trying to establish who their next guys up are. And it matters. It matters in the NBA because in the NBA, it is a star-driven league. And if you don't have that established at some point, or at least have those best players in the MVP conversation, in the spotlight, playing competitive games against each other, it hurts the league. They know this. They recognize this. This is a part of it. My prediction now is that 65-game rule, it's gone. It's gone after this year because it's too polarizing. The spotlight has been far too bright on it. And you can't have three of your top four MVP candidates be told, nope, you're not allowed to win MVP. Now, if you wouldn't play 40 games in a season, I get it. We could drop the number down to 50, 45. I mean, there are limits to what you can do with this. But, dude, we can't have SGA and Nikola Jokic both be told you can't be MVPs. You're not even in the conversation. They played last night, by the way. Big old fight. This is what it sounded like. Oh, my God. Yep. And there you go. You got Nikola Jokic and SGA getting into it earlier. 2 MVP candidates. Lou Dort comes in because he's the enforcer. Lou Dort could play defensive end in the NFL, by the way. He is just a chiseled monster. He's a tough dude. But of course, he comes in and kind of throws an elbow and a shoulder into Nikola Jokic. And if you do yourself a favor, go around the internet and just look at Nikola Jokic's crazy eyes. I will tell you this. I won't tell these stories on air, but I have had stories from past Denver Nuggets front office personnel that have gone on trips overseas with Nikola Jokic's brothers. And I mean, we've heard the stories about his brothers and how tough those dudes are. You saw it in Nikola Jokic in that face last night, in that fight. But here's the thing. That game was the NBA doesn't want fights. There's always going to be scars from the malice of the palace. It's always going to be a thing. But what they do want is competitive games. They do want a level of physicality. Even if you're like, well, the NBA's soft now in the rules. Yeah, I mean, to a point. You don't want bad boy Pistons, because everybody likes to glamorize that team like it was fun. Go back and watch the highlights. It's a football game. I don't want to watch that. I'll watch football for that. But you do want to see some level of physicality. But mostly you want to see competition. And the Nuggets and Thunder are 2 title contending teams with MVPs on those rosters, and that's what you got last night. But if you have SGA and Nikola Jokic ineligible to win MVP, that's a bad thing for the NBA. Now, does it give opportunities to some other names to rise in the conversation, a Cade Cunningham or a Jaylen Brown in this case? Jaylen Brown getting no attention whatsoever in the MVP race, and look at where the Celtics are. By the way, the Celtics shot almost 67% from the field last night. I know they played the Nets, and the Nets are terrible, but the Celtics, where they are with Jason Tatum out the entire season, maybe on his way back, might play this year. It's starting to sound like they're really pushing for it. And my guess would be he's pushing a little bit more and wants to come back, because you're looking around going, well, we traded a bunch of guys. They sold off this roster. We thought this was going to be sort of just a bridge season. Oh, and the Celtics are still good. But the Celtics are in contention, and the Celtics are an actual contender in the East because of Jaylen Brown. So, yes, does this give opportunities to a Cade Cunningham, who absolutely should be in the conversation? I've been a fan of Cade Cunningham since he was drafted out of Oklahoma State. But you play for the Pistons, and for a while they were just a horrendous franchise, and they weren't winning games, and nobody cared. But now you're seeing, oh, Cade Cunningham, pretty damn good. If you're not paying attention to Cade Cunningham, pay attention to him. But Jaylen Brown, Cade Cunningham, 2 great opportunities for them to be in the MVP conversation, but you've got to have it be a full competition, right? It's like if you go back and look at a playoff series in the NBA or a playoff game in the NFL, and stars are not involved in those games. It's like those peak Chiefs-Bills games over the years in the playoffs. If Josh Allen missed one of those games, would you look at them the same way? No. The stars have to be involved. The stars have to be involved in the MVP race. The stars have to be involved in NBA playoff series, in the NBA finals, all of that. You need that for your league and for fans, right? Aren't you going to be more interested in an NBA playoff series against 2 heavyweights if all the stars are actually out there? It matters. It's a star-driven league. And look, the face of the NBA, this whole conversation, this quest that they're on, it's going to be going on for a while. Like, it's not going to get established in a year. And Nikola Jokic is the best player in the NBA now. What makes it great is you're watching a guy with a 7-footer with a dad bod that plays like a point guard, that loves his horses, yet at the same time, he gets crazy eyes if you lower his shoulder. I'm looking at it right now, too. It's next to me on one of my screens on my laptop. I mean, if you watch me on YouTube, here, I'll do it for you. That's it. And you just hear the sound if you're listening, and that's it. The point is, though, like, Nikola Jokic will never truly be the face of the league because he just doesn't care enough to be in that spotlight. He really doesn't. He wants to play ball, and when he's done, he wants to go back home and be around his horses. And that's cool. Like, I don't blame a guy for that. He's doing what he does well. He's great at it. He's the best player in the league, but it just comes so naturally for him. You almost wonder if he cared more and was, because it's not like he's not competitive when he's on the court, but it's just one of those things where he has other interests. Like, if Nikola Jokic was as obsessed with basketball as Kobe, how good would he be? There's a level of obsession that Kobe Bryant had, that Michael Jordan had, that I just don't think Nikola Jokic has. He has other interests. And that is okay to have other interests. But you sometimes wonder, I always go back and look at Shaq, and Shaq's talked about this. He's like, if I really want to get in better shape, I would have been even better. You always wonder, what would have Shaq been if he was really in shape all the time? Charles Barkley used to, like, eat McDonald's and just get on the stationary bike and practice. But some of these guys, it's just so natural for them. They just don't have, it's like to be better than 95% of the players in the league, it just comes effortlessly for them. It's just God-given talent. And that's, the NBA is, there's a chance that whoever the next face of the NBA isn't even in the league right now, right? We talk so much about how hyped this draft is and all the talent that's there and the tanking and how everybody's tanking. All right, every team wants to have a top draft pick. Yeah, that's how the system works, and it makes sense. But you may have a Darren Peterson who's got his own controversies or whether or not he's hurt and why he's coming out of games for Kansas. I mean, if you have a top 3 pick in this draft, you'd be getting a franchise-altering player. Maybe one of those guys. AJ DeBanston ends up being the face of the NBA. So we may not even be looking at the next face of the NBA playing in the league right now. Could be a kid that's 15 that ends up being the face of the league in a couple of years. There's a chance. Look, just because a player is not looked at as the best player in a draft class or the best player in the league their first couple of years in the NBA doesn't mean that that's not going to change, right? I mean, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, when he was a rookie with the Clippers, many forget that, was probably not looked at as an MVP. I know he wasn't. He was looked at as a good player. Nobody thought he'd be this good. Guys elevate their game. It happens. So there's a lot of change that's coming, and there's a good chance. Like if you go back and look at post-Jordan Bulls before LeBron was drafted in 23, it was Kobe and the Lakers and Shaq, and this transition was at Duncan for a while and the Spurs. You had this kind of transition phase. That's what the NBA is heading towards. Now, I would say this, the NBA is in a really good spot because you have a lot of talent. It's not like the NBA is devoid of young talent. They got a lot. They got a lot of really good young players, and Anthony Edwards is one of the names that's obviously thrown around, kind of plays like Jordan. He's always going to be compared. You're going to have, it's all going to be now about who plays like Jordan, who plays like LeBron, who fits those molds, who's like those guys moving forward. That's essentially what we're looking at, and Anthony Edwards kind of fits that. But does it work if you're playing in Minnesota? Sorry, like it's just not a big market and it's harder. If Anthony Edwards was playing in New York, it'd be a different story. I'm just telling you, if he's playing LA, it'd be a different story. And yes, it's not to the same level it used to be in the NBA where you have to be playing in a major market and you have to play for one of these historic franchises. You can still have that spotlight. Everybody can watch every game now. It's on a million different platforms. Social media elevates everybody's star power in the NBA, and the league understands how to market players and make sure that there's a spotlight on them. But there are still limits. If the Timberwolves were in the finals for like 3 straight years and they won a couple of titles, it'd be a different story. And that still is what it comes down to, too. You do have to win titles. We do a lot of ring counting in the NBA, but to a point, that's a good thing, right? You're still holding great players to a high standard. Well, if you're so great, why hasn't your team won a title yet? Now, that's that unfair to a point? Yeah, absolutely. Because it is still a team sport, and there's only so much that you can do. Even as like a quarterback in the NFL, Dan Marino never won a Super Bowl, went to one early in his career, never went back. Dan Marino was an all-time great quarterback, never in the conversation. Unless it's a deeper conversation going down the list of quarterbacks, he gets overlooked because he never won a Super Bowl. Fair or not, that's how the narrative is played out about his career. Dan Marino was an unbelievable quarterback. And even as a quarterback, you have your limits. As much as you control, you still have to have talent around you to a point. Like there is still a level of that exists. And it's the same thing in the NBA where you can be as talented as Anthony Edwards is and as competitive as Anthony Edwards is. And by the way, a great personality. Anthony Edwards fits the mold in the NBA for face of the league. And maybe he ends up being that guy. But the Timberwolves have to win. If he stays in Minnesota, they have to win. Now, again, if he starts playing in New York, LA, or Boston, or some of these other major markets and these franchises that have a lot of history or at least polarizing, the Knicks, it's much more losing over a long period of time. But, that's a different story. I'm picturing Anthony Edwards in a Knicks uniform right now as a Knicks fan, and I'm going to probably move on from that because it just gives me chills. Would love to see it. But, this is why teams tank in the NBA. This is why teams are so desperate to find that star because it can elevate your team to new heights really quickly. And it's not every year. It's why this draft is different. But people are looking around going, the Bands could change our entire roster, could change our entire trajectory. Darren Peterson is still looked at, even with the controversies around him checking out of games and whether or not he's hurt and whatever the case is. It's, dude, look at what this guy can do. And he doesn't even look as explosive right now in college. which leads you to believe that maybe there is a level of injury that's there, or he's dealing with cramping issues and they don't want to make it public, which at this point, I'd make it public. Like, if people are questioning your work ethic or your drive or desire and comparing you to Ben Simmons in some spots, you need to get out there and just be like, look, I'm hurt. Sorry. You're better off doing that than trying to be the tough. I've never understood that. The whole idea of like, let's not talk about my injuries. Oh, just keep it a secret. And then people question your work ethic, your desire, your drive, your dedication. Is that what you want? Or, oh, I'm hurt? It's better off that you're hurt and there's a reason for it than, oh, I'm just checking myself out of games. You don't want that narrative around you. But this is a league that is star driven, and teams will sacrifice years to be able to find that guy. We knew the Spurs were tanking for Victor Wembanyama, but there's luck involved. And let's be honest with ourselves, tanking doesn't guarantee a damn thing. It doesn't guarantee anything. They've smoothed out these odds, and we know how the NBA is trying to change it more, and it's more prevalent, and the spotlight's on it more this year because you've got this draft class. Just like the 65-game rule in the NBA, where if you don't hit 65 games, can't win awards, that's going to change because there's a spotlight on it. Hey, it's just like when players say that your field is really bad, Pittsburgh Steelers. Oh, suddenly then the spotlight's on it and you decide, like they did yesterday, oh, don't worry, we're going to get a new grass field out there. It's going to be all different because there's a spotlight on it. If you don't magnify a problem, nobody's going to change it. The minute that it's out there and it's public, that's when change actually happens. Bad ownership and bad decisions they make, you got to shame owners publicly for them to make any changes whatsoever. You've got to shame the NBA essentially for saying, can't play 65 games, 3 of your top 4 might not be eligible for MVP. That's a thing. And it's the same thing if you're looking at tanking. Teams are getting shamed now because everybody's making it very obvious. Well, we're not going to win anyway. We might as well try and lose and get one of these franchise-altering players in a super deep draft. By the way, beyond top 3, really good players there. So it's what it comes down to sometimes. All right, we're brought to you by Progressive Commercial Insurance, protecting your business vehicles 24/7. See if you can save at progressivecommercial.com. There are some potential hypothetical trades that have been thrown around the NFL, including CJ Stroud. Where these quarterbacks could go, we're going to play a little game next. Nick Cashew, Westwood One Sports. All right. So this is the time of year where it's lying season. It's whether it's the draft, who you're going to draft, who a team might trade for, free agency, franchise tag. I mean, all of it. There's just everybody's lying about everything, and they're sending these reports and little feelers out there to see what's going to happen. Then there's the quarterback trade rumors, which are always my favorite. I'm surprised we don't have this more in the NFL. I mean, honestly, I'm surprised there's a certain point where quarterbacks don't just force their way out and request trades. And I know that Anthony Richardson is in a spot where the Colts have said, yeah, we'll trade you. We'll explore something together. But that's more of just they know it's not going to work. It's another if it was somebody like Joe Burrow, who I keep throwing out there as a potential guy who could look and say, like, I'm tired of being in this Bengals organization. Now, granted, some of the injuries you can't control. Some of it is a lack of protection. Yes, he's got great receivers throwing him the football. But at what point, if you're Joe Burrow, do you say, I'd love to be somewhere else? Like, if Matt Stafford retires after this year, what's to stop Joe Burrow from saying, I want to go play with Sean McVay and keep Sean McVay from just leaving? Because if Matt Stafford retires, does Sean McVay really want to be the head coach of a team that's rebuilding? I don't think he does. He's already won a Super Bowl. He's had a ton of success. He knows he can go into TV or do a bunch of other things, come back in a year or two, start fresh. But would you stay if you could get Joe Burrow in that Sean McVay offense? Woo-hoo. I mean, if I'm a Rams fan, I would be drooling at the opportunity. There's no rumor for that. I'm just making it up. But, I mean, there were rumors that C.J. Stroud and the Texans might be, I mean, there might be a trade in the works. Of course, Nick Caserio, the GM of the Texans, came out and said, hell no, that's not going to happen. We're not going to trade him. But it makes you think. It makes you think of some potential hypothetical trades, at least, that could happen this offseason, whether it's changes in the front office, changes with head coaches, teams maybe looking to rebuild or do something new. Carlos, I'll bring you in here. We're going to play a little game, my friend. We're going to play hypothetical trades, and I don't really have a good name for it. We're just going to call it hypothetical NFL trades, because I think about this, Carlos, and I think about C.J. Stroud and a bunch of teams that might say, hey, we could get more out of him than what the Texans have done, because here's the taste that's sitting in everybody's mouth right now. They're remembering C.J. Stroud and an abomination in the playoffs. I mean, just terrible for the Texans, where that defense did everything they could to try and save them, to try and keep them alive with a quarterback that looked like he forgot how to quarterback right now. I'm going to throw out, Carlos, a couple of spots for you, and you tell me what might be the best fit for C.J. Stroud if he were to get traded. Now, there's one I'm going to throw out. These are teams that might need a quarterback, that might move on from the current quarterback they have. And yes, some of them, Carlos, we're going to laugh at right off the bat, because you know I make fun of these teams all the time. The New York Jets, the Pittsburgh Steelers, the Arizona Cardinals are three teams that I think of right now for a potential C.J. Stroud trade. Would you see him in any one of those positions, or would you throw another team in that could maybe consider C.J. Stroud if they were looking to make that move? I do not hear Carlos. Oh, no. Are the Gremlins back? No! Oh, the Gremlins are back. All right, well, here's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to sip coffee and move forward. Well, Carlos, if you can talk, you just start talking, buddy, and I'll tell you if I hear you, because here we go again. That's all I'm going to say. But I'll move on and tell you this. Here's the thing. There's a reason why quarterbacks are not moved often in the NFL, right? We know how important it is to have a quarterback and to put you in an opportunity where you can succeed, where you're at least raising your floor, versus being out there in this offseason going, who the hell is our quarterback going to be? Do we give Malik Willis $30 million? Do we reach for a quarterback like Ty Simpson at the end of the first round? Do we put ourselves in a position where we're financially liable for Kyler Murray's contract, even if it's not all of it, or Tua, and just look around and go, it's a tough spot to be in. So if I'm the Texans, would I move on from C.J. Stroud? No, I wouldn't. But if I'm another team that sees what he was his rookie year with Bobby Slowick as the offensive coordinator. Before then, it all fell apart and they fired him and say, well, we know what the ceiling could be. What if he worked in our system? What if it worked in our offense? The problem is the Jets are not that team. I think I heard somebody. Was that you, Carlos? Are you actually alive now? Are you there? There you go. And I knew you were there. We fixed. I know it was perfect and it worked. That's how we flow live when something decides it doesn't want to work with us. So CJ Stroud was the rumor, and this is, look, I don't think the Texans move on from him, but I do think there are teams that are picking up their phone, Carlos, and saying, hey, so what would it take for us to get CJ Stroud from you guys? Yeah. Mhm. I remember. The Commanders were going to talk to him because he was in their organization. Bobby Slowick was a head coaching candidate after that first year. Oh, Cardinals. Okay. All right, so Carlos, I'm making you the GM right now of the Houston Texans. It's not Nick Caserio, it's you. Would you take Kyler Murray and a first-round pick for CJ Stroud? Okay. I wouldn't either. I wouldn't either. And see, this is the tough part if you're looking at the Cardinals, because if the Cardinals are going to move on from Kyler Murray, which by all accounts, that sounds like that's going to be the case, the question always then becomes, though, if not him, then who? And that's the big question I always ask, because we've seen this time and time again with quarterbacks in the NFL where, oh, yeah, well, his ceiling is lower than, oh, they're only going to win 9, 10 games with them. Great. But what's your plan? Is it totally gut the thing and start over? Is it go and get yourself another quarterback that's going to be a bridge? Like, where do you go? And there's still so much upside with CJ Stroud. What's putting them, Carlos, against this, kind of painting the Texans into a corner right now is that they got to think about what they're going to pay him. And Bryce Young's another one. Think about if you're the Panthers right now and you're the Texans, you are now thinking what that deal is going to look like beyond their rookie contract. You're talking extension, and we know how expensive that can get. Even for quarterbacks that you have a lot of questions for, you still end up paying them because the alternative is wandering the desert aimlessly looking for what you think is a quarterback, and it turns out to be a mirage. Yep. 50 million. God. Yeah. I've seen other names thrown around too, and I don't think it ever happens. Lamar Jackson not getting traded. The Ravens aren't doing that. Like some of these rumors you hear out there, I know are complete BS, and I'm not playing that game. But Lamar Jackson is an absolute no for me. I'm not trading him if I'm the Ravens. I don't expect that to happen. I've seen Jared Goff thrown around too. That's not happening. Just because they had one down year. Sure, you may not have Ben Johnson as your offensive coordinator, but again, the success that the Lions have had with Jared Goff at quarterback is certainly a lot better than what the alternative could be for them at this point. But then there's again going back to Joe Burrow, and I haven't gotten you in on this yet. But if you're the Bengals, and yes, they have said they are not even entertaining offers for Joe Burrow, but it goes to my point again. At what point, if you're a quarterback that's in a situation that may have already hit the ceiling, you may have a lower ceiling there. At what point, if you're Joe Burrow, do you say, I can't be here anymore. I need a fresh start and try and take control of your situation, sort of like half the NBA does now at this point? Yep. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Let me throw a scenario out there for you then. If you're the Texans, do you offer CJ Stroud and a first round pick for Joe Burrow? Yes. I would do it in a second too if I'm the Texans. Absolutely. And it's funny because even though there are, and you're right about the injuries and staying healthy, but some of it is also like it's not just based on the player. There's a level of sometimes it's the training staff and how they handle injuries that maybe get worse that you don't hear about until they get worse in a season. Again, some of these injuries have been bad luck for Joe Burrow. Hit his hand on a helmet or something along those lines. That stuff does exist, but if I'm Joe Burrow, I'm looking around and I'm starting to think with you, like the grass is greener on the other side in some places. And I get you got two number ones in Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. I mean, he's got weapons at wide receiver, some solid, a solid run game, but the offensive line has been a mess. The defense has been a mess. They've tried to address the offensive line a little bit. It hasn't worked. Like, at what point do you just say there are better opportunities there? Imagine Joe Burrow with the Texans and that Texans defense. What would have happened if Joe Burrow were healthy and the Texans had that defense in the playoffs? They would have certainly been at least like, I mean, the ceiling goes through the roof if you're Houston. And this is probably the only way that the Bengals can move off Joe Burrow. If he says, I don't want to be here anymore, and goes behind the scenes at least and privately pushes for something like that. But in return, the Bengals know that they can get a quarterback that still has the potential for upside, that calms the fan base a little bit, knowing that your relationship maybe is worn thin if you're the Bengals and Joe Burrow. But you can say we got a young CJ Stroud coming in and we've got an opportunity to grow him. We've maximized our time with Joe Burrow. And then they'll probably do the whole like leak it and say he wasn't here and make him, he didn't want to be here. And it sounds like he's the villain and you do that whole thing. But that's the only way. Like, you can't be the Bengals and pay all this money to wide receivers like T. Higgins and Jamar Chase and then not have a quarterback that can throw them the football. So you frame it in this sense of we're bringing in another quarterback that can fill the gap right away, that may not have the resume that Joe Burrow's already had early in his career, but at least has the potential. If you're doing it like we're trading Joe Burrow and you get 2 first-round picks and we're going to draft our guy in a year or two, and for the next year we've got Kirk Cousins at quarterback, that ain't going to work with your fans. But then again, the organization's cheap. And despite the fact that they've paid some wide receivers overall, they are really cheap. Again, I point you to the NFLPA report cards and how the Bengals were rated as well. Not good either. But that's something where the only way that happens, and rightfully so, the only way that happens is if Joe Burrow starts to crowbar his way out the door and is like, you can lock this thing on me, but I'm going to force my way out. That's the only way the Bengals make that trade. And rightfully so. That should be the case. But at some point, Joe Burrow and his potential somewhere else, because remember, Matt Stafford dealt with a lot of injuries in his career in Detroit, had some success, but was constantly hurt. He goes to the Rams. Yes, he still dealt with some injuries, but he wins a Super Bowl. We've seen the success that he's had with the Rams. Again, Joe Burrow to the Rams, if Matt Stafford retires after next season, is a perfect fit. If I'm Sean McVay, I'm staying. You've got a training staff that can hopefully keep him as healthy as possible, like they've been able to do with Matt Stafford. You can maximize and elevate Joe Burrow at that sense to a level we probably haven't even seen yet. It all makes perfect sense. And it's a really similar situation to where we were with Matt Stafford in Detroit, where you knew what Matt Stafford could be, but it was, does he stay healthy? Is the organization putting enough talent around him for him to actually succeed? And really, in the end, for Detroit and the Rams, at least it worked out to a point where you got the most out of Jared Goff. The trade worked. So this could be a situation here where you're not maybe getting a Jared Goff back in return if you're the Bengals. But if I'm the Rams, I'm offering all kinds of stuff, all kinds of assets to the Bengals. If I'm the Rams, to say, look, give us Joe Burrow because Matt Stafford's retiring. And then Joe Burrow says, I want out. That's where I want to be. I'm not showing up. I'm willing to do it or I'll go retire. I mean, actually, Carson Palmer threatened to retire years ago if the Raiders didn't trade him, and it got him to the Cardinals, and he had some success late in his career there too. So there is precedent for that. It does happen. It does happen. But at some point, the Joe Burrow situation, you got to worry. You got to wonder whether that's going to be the case, and he moves on. All right, Nick Ashew, Westwood One Sports. Well, that's certainly what a couple of college programs are going to be saying to quarterbacks. Trinidad Chambliss, Dante Moore staying. And I think about this more and more as we get closer and closer to the NFL draft, as the combine's going on, and some guys are working out and some aren't. And now there's this talk about Ty Simpson maybe being quarterback that sneaks into the first round. I wouldn't be surprised if on the back end of the first round you see a team take him, just so you can maybe even do what the Ravens did, in the sense where we'd rather have him on where the benefit of that rookie contract hits you a little bit more. Drafting a guy in the first round gives you that extra year, gives you that fifth-year option, all of those things, and you sit Ty Simpson at the beginning. That may be the situation. There's not a lot of quarterbacks to choose from in this draft. There's not a lot of quarterbacks like we talked about in the free agent market, on the potential trade market. Even if we want to come up with all of these wild scenarios of C.J. Stroud for Joe Burrow, which, by the way, would be wild if that actually happened. But, realistically, we're seeing more and more players now want to stay in college a little bit longer. There's a lot of factors there. And the big thing and the big polarizing names were Trinidad Chambliss and Dante Moore, and it was different situations and different times. And Dante Moore, it was less of a fight, obviously, for eligibility. But I also argue Dante Moore looked and said, oh, my God, the Jets are drafting number 2. I can't go there, which you can control your destiny as much as you can. You want to stay away from the Jets. The Jets don't have a track record at all of ever developing quarterbacks. Why would you want to be there? Ever. Ever. But, if you look at the risk that was certainly taken, because there is a lack of talent at quarterback in this draft, though, you do have to think, for a Trinidad Chambliss and a Dante Moore, what does next year look like? Now, we look at it in theory right now as being a more talented quarterback class potentially, but we all know this can change. It wasn't that long ago that Spencer Rattler was looked at as a number 1 overall pick, and we all know how that went. So it can change very quickly. It's one thing to do mock drafts a year in advance and look at a bunch of quarterbacks and think they could develop potentially into a franchise quarterback, into a first-round pick, but it can fall off very quickly depending on how that college season goes. I mean, Justin Herbert slid a little bit when he went back to school, but his situation worked out, I'd argue, right? I mean, we can talk about the playoffs all day, but Justin Herbert showed very quickly when he started for the Chargers that, he was legit, and they knew right away that he was that guy. But, there is a risk of staying in school for some of these young quarterbacks, like a Chambliss, like a Dante Moore, when it's Fernando Mendoza and probably nobody else in that first round. But here's the one thing that I will say. It sounds great in theory to be drafted as high as possible. He could be a top 5 pick. He could be a top 10 pick. That's mostly ego talking. And I get that, yes, where you are drafted in the first round specifically slots you in with more money or less money, depending on where it is. And if you fall in the draft, you lose some initial money. I understand that. But I, again, point you back to Anthony Richardson, who now is going to get traded this offseason, who has had a horrible stint with the Colts. He was drafted 4th overall, made some money. But what if he was drafted late first round by a team that actually sat him for a while and developed him to where he then stepped in and became a quarterback that was at least a starting quarterback, and was somebody that earned a second contract and succeeded, as opposed to, you don't know what his future is. No idea. Not a clue. Where he's going to go, what he's going to look like as a quarterback. Does he ever develop? What that situation is, where he is. Again, I'd argue that he should go somewhere where he can be a backup and learn and grow. Spend 2 years in a system. Mac Jones is probably going to spend another year in San Francisco. Might end up working out for him. He looked pretty damn good in that Kyle Shanahan offense when Brock Purdy was out. So just because you get drafted high doesn't mean that that's the best spot. I mean, really, if you're looking at Aaron Rodgers, remember years ago when Aaron Rodgers dropped to Green Bay? Aaron Rodgers could have been drafted by a really bad 49ers team where Alex Smith ended up getting drafted, and that was a horrible stint until Jim Harbaugh was there. And if you're Aaron Rodgers, you sat, you learned. I know Brett Favre didn't really like it, but it ended up working out for Aaron Rodgers. Now, he could have been a great quarterback no matter what. There's that chance, but sometimes in the end, it's not about the number that you're drafted at, and it's where you're drafted, the actual team, the location. All of those can end up creating a better situation, more longevity, and a better career moving forward. So, as great as it is for us to look at Trinidad Chambliss or a Dante Moore or any other quarterback that could have been drafted higher, because you've got all of these teams that might be looking for quarterbacks higher, yeah, great. You could be number 2 overall pick of the Jets. How's that worked out before? Ask Sam Darnold who was a number 3 overall pick. Then ask Zach Wilson, who was a number 2 overall pick. Neither one of them play for the Jets anymore. Spoiler alert. Do I think that had a factor in that? Absolutely. And I think that's a smart move. Look, Dante Moore is going to get like $5 million this year. And that's what really helps now, too. It makes it easier for players to stay. I'm going to stay another year. Or if you're Trinidad Chambliss saying, I'm going to fight until I get everything. I mean, I'm going to get every little bit of eligibility that I possibly can, because you'll make money in NIL. It's going to be life-altering money either way. You get more experience in college, which we know Dante Moore still needed. In the past, guys left earlier to get drafted higher and make the money and get at least some level of guaranteed money on your rookie contract and go from there. But now you can make great money, develop, learn, enjoy the college experience with maybe very little classes to have to go to, get better with another year of experience, whatever the situation is, or you just like it and know that the NFL is going to be there in some capacity for you. That matters just as much. That's really changed a lot of the landscape, probably more in football than basketball. You still see guys wanting to leave, get drafted in the NBA early because you stay 3-4 years. It's kind of points against you. Doesn't really help, right? You want to see all these. I mean, look at this draft coming up in the NBA. They're all going to be 19-year-old kids. They're all freshmen, right? It's just you go younger. It's held against you a lot more in the NBA if you stay too long in college versus the NFL, especially at the quarterback spot. The experience does matter. And again, we've seen that. Look at the 2024 class and all of the success that Bo Nix has already had, that Jaden Daniels at least had his rookie year, that Drake May had this year, that Caleb Williams had this year. Injuries have hurt some of them for sure, but those quarterbacks all had a ton of experience in college. It does translate. It does matter. These quarterbacks that have 10, 11 starts for their entire college career, you can go look at the numbers. It hurts them when they get to the NFL if they're expected to just step in and start right away. It matters having that experience against great college programs. And look, even on top of this too, I mean, Dante Moore obviously transferred and went to a new system. Like, quarterbacks transferring and going to a bigger program or a program that's going to give you better competition after a year or two at a smaller program. Michael Penix Jr. transferred from Indiana to Washington. Jaden Daniels, Arizona State to LSU. Even Caleb Williams, right? I mean, it was Oklahoma to USC, but you still had that. I mean, Bo Nix transferred. I mean, you go around and see these quarterbacks that spent more time learning at the college level and getting that experience. It does matter and it does help. And you get put in these positions in the NFL where you're not used to it. You're not seeing one or two great linebackers or corners or edge rushers a game. You're seeing the best of the best at the college level now put on an NFL roster. They may not all be the best in the NFL, but they're damn good. I mean, look at the combine. We got edge rushers running 4.5 40s. We got safeties running 4.27 40s. They're fast. They're athletic. These guys are all at the NFL level. They've risen to the top now. So you can see some NFL talent game by game on a defense as you go through the SEC schedule the entire season or whatever the case is. But, man, it's a whole other conversation when you're talking the best of the NFL level. And it's something to be said for doing everything you can as a quarterback, specifically a quarterback, right? Because the spotlight is on you. The entire offense runs through you. Getting that experience as much as possible, soaking it all up while also making 7 figures and then still having the NFL waiting for you makes a ton of sense. And I think we're going to see more of that, especially when you know what the draft order is. Because you can't control who drafts you. You can try to push it like Eli Manning did. How often does that really happen? Right? Like, how often do guys really say, I'm not going to go play for them? It's rare. It rarely happens. You don't have that much leverage as a young quarterback or a rookie in any sport. You really don't. You have more leverage once you've been in the league for a little while, but you don't have that much leverage when you're there right away. So that's a tough thing to do. So it's better to just try and avoid it altogether. We've seen this in the past where guys come back and it's at least a question of, did they not want to get drafted there? I mean, Caleb Williams' dad was throwing out names for a while before he entered the draft where it made it sound like he was going to stay, right? So he didn't, but you know, there were conversations with that too. So You got to kind of think about the trajectory of your career. It's not just about the immediate payoff. It's about the long term. It's why I think Anthony Richardson should go somewhere where he could be a backup. And it's why I don't blame a Dante Moore or a Trinidad Chambliss staying in college a little bit longer and hoping that next year's draft becomes something where maybe even a team wants to trade up for you. You know what? That's what helped. That's what helped Patrick Mahomes. Let's not forget. The Chiefs were a playoff team that traded up to draft him. They had Alex Smith already ready to go when they sat him. So put him in a good position. Tell you what, it's going to be interesting to see how this offseason goes in the NFL. That's for sure. There's a lot of moving parts, to say the least. Lee, great job. Carlos, great job today. Fewer gremlins, which is what we all love. I'm Nick Ashew, Westwood One Sports.